Welcome to Career Tools. This week, my new job is too difficult for me. The questions this cast answers are: what do I do when I start a new job and it's too difficult? How do I talk to my boss about my job being too difficult? And how do I stop getting jobs that are too difficult for me? One of the jobs that many people think is too difficult for them is management. The first few months of management are the most difficult of your career. No matter how much you wanted it, how much you thought you prepared, how much you thought, or how much other people told you were going to be great, those first few months will make you question everything. Mark wrote The Effective Manager as a book you could have on your desk to remind you of the basic blocking and tackling of management. It tells you exactly what to do and how to do it when you're losing your mind. The second edition adds guidance about the complexity of remote and hybrid teams. It won't take away the doubt, but it will provide a signpost when all around you is fog. You can purchase a signed copy on the Manager Tools website. It's pretty common for people, especially early in their career, to take jobs and within a few days or weeks, or sometimes months, but more commonly days or weeks, to say, this job is way too hard, it's way too difficult, I'm never going to get it, and I shouldn't have taken it in the first place, and they just resign. And their poor manager is left with another empty space. And probably in 90% of the cases, the person leaves way too early. They could have got it. It's just the experience of just that early stage. It always seems too difficult. And we wanted to write this and give this guidance just to get you past that really difficult stage that everybody goes through and try and convince you that it isn't too difficult and you are going to get through this in 90% of cases. And so if you are in that stuck place and you're thinking about resigning, at least listen to the end of this guidance. And if you're a manager and you've got someone who's just started and seems to be struggling, maybe there's some help in here that can get you to get them through this stuck place too.
Yeah. Our outline for today is: first, wait. Then, talk to your boss, work on your relationships, focus on what matters most, speak up before you resign, and avoid getting jobs that are too hard. So first is wait. Whether it's been a couple of days or a couple of months, don't make a sudden decision that this job is too much for you and you should give up. You're not the first person who's ever started a job and thought, oh, this is too tough. This is too difficult. In fact, most of us have gone through that, where we start a job because we've all heard this, there's a learning curve. We're going to talk more about, the curves. But, every job you start should be a little difficult in the beginning, because it's something that you either haven't done before or something that is different than you've done before. And so there's always going to be those, the beginning and some periods in between where it's difficult. And we don't want you to think that just because you're experiencing this, that you're an anomaly or it's just you.
And it always looks easy from the outside, right? I used to, when I was a kid, I used to think I could work at the post office, because when I was a kid, all the man at the post office did was he had a stamp and he stamped things. He stamped the ink and then he stamped things, and it all looked very fun. And I thought I could do that. I could go around stamping things. And I'm sure it was much harder than it looked. But, everything looks easy from the outside. And we underestimate the amount of brain power it takes to learn new things, that it takes to develop new routines, that it takes to think in new ways, that it takes to deal with new people, that it takes to play a different role, to be in a different role, that it takes to manage ourselves, that it takes to manage our own minds and our own thinking, let alone actually perform in a new role. Even if you move desks, even if you don't change jobs, but you move desks, there's a week where you feel all discombobulated and everything seems harder for a week. It's weird. Even if, your software gets upgraded and it's one of those minor things where they just move one thing, there's a week where everything seems harder because that one thing is not where you think it's going to be, because it takes some of the brain power. And you imagine that multiplied 1,000, 1,000,000 for a new job. That's why it's difficult.
Yeah. Everything we do as human beings is difficult at first. I have 3 kids, and I remember some of the first things that they do, right? Like crawling, or even just when they're rolling over as a baby, like these little things. I remember my middle son, we were so excited when he could start sitting up on his own. But if he started to fall backwards, he can't catch himself. So he can do one thing, but he can't do the other thing. That's kind of important because that prevents him from hitting his head. And all the way from doing those things to learning how to drive. And I mean, you think about it now, we do it now, and most people aren't even really inserting any mental effort. They're kind of on autopilot. And we've talked about this on podcasts, like those days where you just blink and you're at work and you go, how did I get here? Because you go through the motions. But when you were learning to drive, it was stressful and it was difficult. And you were like, why can't I do this? Or why can't I get the car to do that?
Because I couldn't concentrate on the music. And now I can have a conversation, have a podcast on, and be listening to the lady give me directions and drive.
Yeah. And Wendy and I were just talking the other day about how they didn't give you directions. You didn't have a phone. You had to use a map.
You did.
Yeah. Crazy. Simpler times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in everything that we do, we have these experiences where we go through what we call the McGuire hump of the horseman curve. And Mark introduced the idea of the horseman curve and the McGuire hump in the Horseman Curve podcast. And he said, have you ever noticed how when you try to move a piece of furniture, it's harder to push it initially? It kind of sticks, right? But then after you get it unstuck, it moves easier. And as Mark explained, that's science. Friction has 2 components. There's static friction and there's dynamic friction. And static friction is always bigger. And that static friction, the concept, applies to human behavior too. Not just the physics of moving furniture, right? The concept of us doing something new or doing something for the first time, there's always going to be more friction.
Yeah, and the Horseman Curve represents the amount of energy you put into something to accomplish your objectives. And it shows both the extra energy, that's the hump at the beginning, necessary to achieve the improvement, and the value of the improvement by reducing the need for effort in the future. In other words, it takes a bunch of effort in the beginning, and then that effort means that later you don't need to put the effort in. So you put all that effort into learning to drive at the beginning, and later driving's easy and you can do 4 other things at the same time. You start something at a 7, say, of effort. Mm-hmm. You increase your effort to 9 for a while. You invest in the process improvements, in learning. You cut out waste by learning the process and the deliverables and learning the people and the actions and all the things you need to take. And then you end up at an energy level of 4 and you're coasting and you can do other things at the same time and still achieve all of the objectives that you set out for yourself.
Yeah. And, the reason we call it the McGuire hump is our dear friend, everyone loves Dan McGuire, and he's the only consultant and coach whom we recommend to the community, right? If we know there's someone who Dan could help, we connect them together. And he made a wry comment when we're talking about the Horseman Curve. He said, why do I always feel like I'm on that hump?
Yeah. He felt like he never gets to the curve. He never gets to the easy bit.
I never get to feel that kind of down slope. Yeah. And the hump is where the extra work happens. The hump is the hard part. And Dan's he's great. He's funny.
He is. And if you've just started a new job, you're on the hump. You're in the McGuire hump. And it's scientifically, it's supposed to be difficult. You're in the right place and you're experiencing what you're supposed to be experiencing. And it's going to get easier if you persevere. Promise.
Absolutely. So our next point is talk to your boss. And hopefully for those that are younger in their career or earlier on in their career, hopefully they'll really take to heart this next sentence, because I love the way that, you've written this in the show notes. It's your boss's perception of your performance is your performance. And that's why people get so stressed out when it comes to end of year reviews or annual reviews, because that is when your boss, right, no matter what's going on or what other things are happening in the organization, that's where your boss is going to cement or put on paper their perception of your performance. And that equals your performance to the organization, because that's what is used to characterize your performance for that year. And in the case of a new job, you may not know. Maybe you haven't built or developed that relationship with your boss yet. You won't know necessarily how they think you're doing. And you might be surprised at how well they think you're doing when you feel like you are floundering.
Yeah. And remember, you don't have the perspective that she does.
Right.
You've never done this job before. And she has, potentially. Sometimes a manager hasn't done that job. Sometimes they have. But she's either done that job, or she's seen other people start that job, or she knows what the tasks are, and she knows how hard she expected it to be, and she knew what you could do when she hired you, or somebody hired you to do that job. They knew what the expectation was of how long it was going to take you to learn this. And, managers often expect someone to take a year to learn a job. Even though everybody says hit the ground running, they don't actually expect you to hit the ground running. Nobody ever does.
No.
It's 6 months to a year.
They want you to hit the ground running because they know if you try to hit the ground running, you'll at least be up to speed on certain things, and hopefully that'll make up for the things that there's no way you could be up to speed on.
Exactly. Some things only happen once a quarter, or once every 6 months, or once a year. You can't possibly know those things in the first 3 weeks. And even if you're disappointed in your performance, if your boss is happy, you are doing okay. We are our own worst enemies, and we expect far more from ourselves a lot of the time than others expect from us. If nobody is telling you you are doing a terrible job, you are not doing a terrible job. Now, that's not true, because, a lot of managers are afraid of confrontation and they don't want to have a negative conversation. But, a lot of the time we are doing better than we think. I don't want the voice of, this is too difficult. This is so hard. I've been here 3 weeks. I'm not getting it. I've had to ask this question twice, to be telling you that you're doing a much worse job and you should quit than the evidence is there.
I think we also put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we start a new job, because we think of this and we start to build pressure on this new job because we think of this as a quote unquote fresh start, or an ability to kind of start with making great first impressions. And I think a lot of people, there's that saying, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And so that adds additional gravitas to the beginning 3, 4, 5, 6 months of a new job. And we're putting too much pressure on ourselves. Everyone understands that someone new is going to take some time to get up to speed. That's why when we do hiring training, managers are like, I got to get people in right now, because our hiring process that we recommend takes time. It's a quality over quantity argument that we make. And they go, well, hiring managers say, I need people right now. And we say, why do you need them so urgently? Because it's going to take me 6 months to get them up to speed. They understand that. They know that.
Yeah. So don't tell your boss that you think the job is too difficult for you. That's the wrong way to go about this conversation. Okay? Instead, ask about your performance. And we're assuming here that your boss isn't being forthcoming about performance. They're not, talking to you actively about that with information about how well you're doing. I used to have a boss at the end of every day who'd say, thank you for all the work you did. You did great today. And I'd be like, because he was a high S. He wanted me to feel good about myself.
Yep.
And I was a high D, and I'd be like, I just did my job. That's so that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But he was very forthcoming about how well he thought I was doing. But you can say something like, I've been here for 6 weeks, and I'd just like your perspective on how well I'm doing, or how well you expected me to be doing. Am I doing okay compared with what you thought? Am I where you thought I would be? Something like that. We're asking about their expectations and where you are. We're not saying, I'm finding this really hard. Am I doing okay? Like
yeah.
We're not putting it into an emotional conversation. We're having a factual conversation about your performance versus their expectation.
And this is not an opportunity. This is not us giving you this direction so that you can be reassured or feel better. You should expect that, you might hear some things. You might hear, hey, not everything's going perfectly. But you should equally not expect that you're going to hear nothing you're doing is working, right? There should be hopefully somewhere in between. And that initial period of a new job is always a mixture of things that you do well, or that, fresh things that you bring to the table, and things that are shortcomings, things that you made a mistake on, you didn't know how that process worked, you didn't know who to reach out to. There's going to be things that are going to go poorly. And that's why it's called a learning curve. On the whole, though, what we're really trying to get from this conversation is it going as badly as you think it is in your mind? And some of the fruits of this conversation could lead us to not our next point, but a further point where we talk about focusing on what matters most, because you could get valuable information from this conversation.
So once you've had that conversation, you've got a list of things, hopefully, that are the things that your boss thinks you need to work on. One of the things to work on is relationships, no matter what your boss just said. We'll come back to that list in a second, but relationships will help you a lot. And the reason we start with relationships, or two reasons we start with relationships. One, it's really easy to change relationships, or to improve relationships drastically, very quickly. And two, really good relationships really help you when things go wrong. So we'll start with, it's easier to improve relationships in a very short period of time than it is to improve results in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
And good relationships make the job easier, but they also get you more forgiveness when things go wrong. And some of your struggle might be that you're not willing to ask enough questions. And the better the relationship you have with people, the more willing you are to ask questions, and the more willing people are to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't been out to lunch with the people you're working with, or you haven't discovered the names of their spouses and their children yet, then make that a priority. It's not that knowing people's children's names magically make you able to work better together. That's not how that works.
No.
If only, right? But if you have a relationship with somebody, then you probably know their children's names. And it's just a sort of proxy. It's a measure of how well are you getting on with this person. If you found out that, at the weekend they like to play golf, and on Monday morning you say, hey, how was the golf game at the weekend? Then you're starting to have a relationship with them. When things are going wrong, it'll help you ask questions. It'll make them more willing to help you and help you avoid pitfalls. It helps you in so many ways.
Yeah. And one fast way to improve relationships is ask people for advice. People love to share advice. I find whether people have been in the organization for a short time or a long time, some people think, well, I can't ask somebody for advice. They only started, 4 months before me. Well, that means they're 4 months ahead of where you are now, which is a good position to be in, a good position to, ask for advice from. So yeah, I think asking people for advice is always a great way to improve your relationship. And you could ask simple questions. So even with, people who you work adjacent to in the organization, you could ask things like, hey, so, I've got to get this done and get it to you. How would you like this to come to you, right? Would you like it in an email? Do you want me to put it in a folder and let you know it's in that folder? Just simple things like that. How do you want this to come to you? What would make that best for you? Or when would you like this to come to you, right? Often I've improved relationships just by asking people, because I've noticed patterns of, when people get involved at this stage of the process, they get frustrated because they weren't involved earlier. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes people get involved early on in the process and they go, I don't even need to be dealing with this now. Wait till you're at this point. So asking that question from the get-go gives a really good impression of thoughtfulness, right? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of you. I don't want to waste your time. I want to be very, purposeful when we get you involved. When's the best time to get you involved?
And sometimes that's a timing thing as well. Like I need that on Tuesday because I have to submit something on a Wednesday.
Oh, such a good point.
That when can be a timing thing too.
Absolutely. If someone works You probably don't have the insight on someone's schedule, but if someone takes every other Wednesday off for, something personal, then it would be good to know that getting it to them on Tuesday afternoon isn't going to help them turn it around until Thursday or Friday, right? Those types of things are really helpful. And I think of it through the lens of, if you can be the colleague in the office who thinks of someone or someone else's job as, how can I make this easier for you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are my favorite colleagues,
Yes, exactly.
right? I need more people who are advocates or allies who are like, I know Wendy's not actively looking to make my job harder. She would like to help me make it easier. Then I want to involve Wendy. I want to have more conversations with Wendy. And when Wendy needs help, I'm going to drop everything to come and help Wendy because I know she's doing the same for me. So those types of things really go a long way. And as Wendy said, can be improved really quickly relative to the same amount of effort or time in getting improved results. So yeah, that's helpful.
With summer officially here next week, you may want to consider using this time to train your managers on the behaviors and skills that allow them to drive results and retain your needed talent. More than ever, solid management skills are needed to navigate the environment, and your organization is no different. We've made it simple to schedule a day of on-site training with us, and we have virtual equivalents, where it's not just the jam-packed field day of learning. We afford all attendees licensing benefits for a full year after the training, equipping your managers with the needed guidance and tools to get results. Contact Maggie at maggie@manager-tools.com to learn about these benefits and pricing for your organization. So now we'll go back to sort of the active things, the list of tasks. So focus on the things that matter most.
Mm-hmm.
If you're struggling, it's tempting to try and focus on everything at once, and you can't be great at everything. We have a limited amount of attention and intellectual power, all of us, and we can't improve every skill in every area on everything we're doing all at once, as much as we might want to. Mm-hmm. So try to choose what to focus on. So we've got a list here of ways to think about the work. And so you might go back to that list that your boss gave you. Here's the list of things that your boss thinks is important, thinks that will make the most difference. So that is an important list. So I'd start there, but here's some other ways to think about your work, of ways to choose what to focus on. So the thing that will get you the most results, the thing that bothers your boss the most, the thing that bothers you the most, the thing that your boss wants you to do, the thing your boss says matters the most, the thing that affects your relationships the most fundamental thing, so the basic thing, the easiest thing to fix, the thing that could most benefit from systemization, or the thing you do most often. So any of those, probably one of the ones that annoys your boss.
Yeah.
Because it's always better to have your boss on side.
Oh, yeah. And I think for that list, I mean, we could walk through a rationale for choosing any of those, right? So any of those will work. Just choose something that will improve your performance overall. Don't focus on improving, I don't know, your spelling if every time you write code, it's broken or somebody needs to debug it, right? Focus on that if that's what your job is, right?
And don't compare your performance to that of other people. Even the people that are doing exactly the same job, who started on the same day as you, are different from you. They have different experience. They have a brain that works differently. They have different knowledge. There is a saying in yoga that is, keep your mind on your own mat, because people don't know this, or people don't think about this, but people's bones are different lengths and their proportions are different. And so that affects the positions you can get into in yoga. It's not that, those yogis have been practicing forever. There are some people whose bones are just the wrong lengths to get into the lotus position. They're never going to do it. And so the yoga teachers say, don't look at that person, because you might never be able to do that. Just keep your own mind on your own mat and think about what you can do. And so comparing yourself is pointless, because you've got the wrong bones. Yeah. It's equally true at work. Spending energy comparing yourself to someone else means you're not spending energy on what you're doing, on improving the things you want to or need to improve. And by all means, look at people to see what they're doing well. One of my secrets of adulthood is you can steal, but not steal things. But, at school, you're not supposed to look at anybody else's work, but in adulthood, you can.
Yeah.
Not stealing IP, but, oh, look, like, that person's much more successful and they have colored folders. Maybe I'll try colored folders, that kind of stealing. Use those ideas to improve your own performance, but don't let it lead you down some rabbit hole of rumination and recrimination. Is that right? Recrimination. Just look at it and go, that seems to be working.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that.
I heard someone say once, the only person you should compare yourself to is who you were yesterday, and try to be better than that. Our next point is speak up before you resign. Many managers have been blindsided by their direct coming to them saying they're resigning because the job was too difficult for them. And many a manager has wished that they could have known because they could have helped. They didn't want to lose this person, and they had the resources or would have found the resources to make a difference. It's not fair on bosses, even if they're bad bosses who are trying to do their best, when you resign, never having had a conversation with them. So the outcome might still be the same. You might resign because this job is too difficult, but give your boss the professional courtesy of letting them try to help you first. It's a matter of being able to, if you do walk away knowing you did everything you could. And that means that then you can move on to the next job or the next thing, knowing you have a free and clear mind, right? I did everything I could do, and now I can move forward. Rather than the alternative, which is potentially thinking to yourself, you start a new job and you go, gosh, there were good things about that last job. Maybe if I would have just talked to my boss, something could have been changed or something could be different. This is your opportunity to do it. Do it before you get to that point.
And the last point is avoid getting jobs that are too hard. So if you find this is a pattern in your life, or you've got a job that's too difficult and you're thinking you're going to end up resigning from it, then the next time you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that again. So there is such a thing as a job that's too difficult for you. In the first 6 months, though, you are probably in the Maguire hump. For a big job, probably the first 2 years. And for a really big job, the first 5 years. If 80% of the job description is within your capabilities, this job is not too difficult for you. You just need to go back to point number 1. Just go way back and listen again.
Yep.
If 80% of this job is not within your capabilities, then have that conversation with your boss. Look for a job that is more of a fit with what you can do now.
And this brings up a good point, because if you have that conversation with your boss, then maybe this role isn't the right fit, but you're still a great fit for the organization. So maybe this gives them the opportunity to say, okay, well, if Andrew wouldn't work in this role or doesn't work out in this role because of it's too difficult or it's beyond their abilities, like maybe we have something for Andrew. A lot of organizations, and depending on when you listen to this cast, because there's always the ebb and flow of the job market, but a lot of organizations are constantly looking for good people who fit their values. And if that is the case and you fit the organization values, but you just can't perform this role or this role doesn't seem to fit for you, that doesn't mean that maybe there isn't something else that you can do to provide value to the organization and that works for you.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe the job, there's just one portion of it. And the manager will say, okay, well, we'll just stop doing that. Or somebody else can do it. Or, we'll give that to a different team or something. We'll have a 6 months.
Or maybe there's software.
Yeah.
Maybe there's software that helps with that would make it easier. There's lots of things.
Yes. Yeah. So if you are looking, pay attention during interviews to the questions you're asked. Are the scenarios ones that you think you can handle? Don't blindly accept a job based on what they're willing to pay you. Think about the day-to-day realities and how difficult that's going to be. Do the majority of the tasks fall within your natural strengths? I turned down a job. I was very, very young, maybe just out of university, and they wanted me to go to lunch with suppliers. And they called me after the first interview and said, we'd like to give you a second interview. And I said, I can't go to lunch with suppliers. I can't. I'm just, it makes me anxious now thinking about it. And I was 22 at the time. And they said, oh, well, we'll just take that part of the job away. And I went for a second interview. And I was shocked that they'd do that. But I knew even then that that wasn't something I could do. So
Yeah.
and the moment you think you have the hang of a job, the landscape shifts, the organization is rearranged, the economy tanks, a competitor flourishes, something happens, and you're starting all over again. You might never have a job that feels easy. You might be like Dan McGuire, stuck on the hump forever. If you are reaching your performance targets, you're doing your best to improve, your boss tells you you're doing okay, you're doing okay. Look how far you've come. Persevere. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Wendy.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with a new topic.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.